Welcome to First Words, a podcast presented by the First United Methodist Church of Florence. Today's message is brought to you by Associate Pastor Reverend Dr. Terry Stubblefield.
Good morning, church. We welcome you here, and I'm glad we can have this time together. Today is the Lord's Day, and it's Mother's Day. Many of you are mothers. We've all had or have mothers. And in addition, we all know awesome mothers and women that have made an impact in our life, who are great inspirations to all of us. So thank God for women in general and mothers in particular. These Bible verses that you just heard a while ago tell us, especially from the book of John, that Jesus promised his disciples help after he's gone. He promised them another advocate. Some versions call this another friend, a companion, a counselor. Jesus has been their rabbi, their teacher, their leader, their master, their advocate, their friend, their companion and counselor for some 3 years. Let's think about the word counselor. We're familiar with that word. We all know about counselors and counseling. We're familiar with wedding counselors, marriage counselors, school guidance counselors, drug and alcohol counselors, job counselors, interior decorating counselors, car buying counselors, shopping counselors, even closet design counselors. Lawyers offer counseling for injuries and wrongs committed against persons. We need medical counseling. And more importantly, we need at times, or at all times, spiritual counseling. Counseling has become a part of our lives. It's estimated that at any given time, 1 out of 10 people in the United States are undergoing counseling of some kind. And all of us, whether we want it or not, receive counseling from family members and friends and work associates. Every intelligent person knows that we don't know everything about everything. And so we need advice, we need counseling, we need help, we need information. It may be medical, it may be accounting, legal, construction, engineering, automotive, or pastoral help. Now you can Zoom or listen to call-in shows, but talking to a real person is where it's really at. What makes a good counselor? Well, first of all, a good counselor really has a personal concern for other people. They're personally concerned, they're compassionate for the needs of others. They listen and are concerned about your welfare. A good counselor has empathy and understands the feelings of the person who comes to them for consultation. A good counselor is healthy and wholesome. A counselor has their head on straight. They are put together. Otherwise, how could they counsel you if they need counseling themselves? A good counselor listens. They do not prejudge. They do not inhibit communication. The lines are open to listen to you. So what does a counselor do? A counselor facilitates your growth. A counselor helps to remove blocks in your life that are keeping you from having a full, complete, fulfilling life. Blocks could include past trauma, abuse, personal habits, personality disorders, disordered problems. A counselor, however, cannot solve your problems. A counselor cannot make decisions for you, but they will enable you, they will strengthen you so that you can make your own decisions. You can make a way forward. So a good counselor helps us to become mature and whole and put together. Well, all of these textbook descriptions of a good counselor and what a counselor does are the same words that describe in the Bible the work of the Holy Spirit, God's gift to us. In the Gospel of John, in chapters 14 through 16, we have information about the Holy Spirit, the counselor. In these 3 chapters, the Holy Spirit is called counselor 5 times to add emphasis to the work of the Holy Spirit as the guide about God, ourselves, and our lives. But what stands out most clearly about the Holy Spirit being called counselor is that God's Spirit will not leave us alone, will not leave us desolate, will not forsake us. God's Spirit will come to be with us, to work in us, to work with us. So what does it mean to you that God is your counselor? Well, the Greek word for counselor is paraclete, which means called to the side of. And when we face a momentous decision, tragedy in our lives, disappointment, we want somebody beside us. They may not can solve the problem. They may not can change things, but they are there with us. That's what God promises. And that's what we are to do for one another in the Spirit of Christ. There for strength and to help us sort out the decisions we need to make. When we think about the characteristics of a good counselor and then considering God as a counselor, this means that God is personally concerned about each one of us. God is concerned about what's best for us. God is an empathetic counselor. God listens, He hears every word, and He knows every thought. The purpose of this Spirit, this counselor, is to help us grow toward maturity and wholeness, to help us see the truth about ourselves, and to recognize the blocks that slow our growth into a full and complete life. Well, the Spirit, God's Holy Spirit, the counselor, comes to our side and gives us strength to help us make difficult decisions. And a good place to find the Spirit is in a Spirit-filled place like this church, where there are other people who are living into the Spirit of God. And this Spirit is available 24/7. It answers every call. There's no busy signal. There's no lost Wi-Fi signal. The Spirit comes to us in our house, down our street. In our reading from Acts 22, 17, 22, and 23, we see that Paul is visiting Athens, Greece. And he doesn't go to the synagogue where there's people like him, where there'd be a safe place to go. He takes off on a city tour. He walks the streets. He looks at the city, and he comes to the Athenians, and he said, I have walked your streets. I have seen your city, and I recognize and see all of these gods that you worship. And I see that you have a statue to the unknown God. Let me tell you about the God you do not know, but the God that I do know. We find here Paul taking the message of God to the streets. Now, a few weeks ago in my sermon, Scandal, I used popular culture to reference Bertie Madoff and George Santos, Herschel Walker, and Kevin Spacey as people involved in scandals when we approached the scandal that wasn't a scandal, the resurrection of Jesus. And then 2 weeks ago, I referenced Star Wars and Batman and Indiana Jones as illustrations of prequels when we were talking about the origin of these movies, but also the origin of the church we read about in Acts chapter 2. Well, not to be outdone, our senior pastor, Dale Cohen, last week referenced The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But I'm up in the ante this week. There was a keyboard player and a backup singer in the band Steely Dan named Michael McDonald. He was invited by the Doobie Brothers to play in on one of their concerts. And on the way, he came up with an idea for a song. He thought, I think I'll call it Takin' It to the Street. Well, he finished that song later, but he performed with the Doobies. They liked it. They invited him to cut an album, including that song that he wrote, Taking It to the Streets. And they said, we want you to sing lead. You wrote this song. It's important to you. And he did. Well, then he became their lead singer, and the rest is history. But in this song, Taking It to the Streets, we read, we hear, you don't know me, but I'm your brother. I was raised here. You don't know my kind in the world. Fairly soon time will tell. Take this message to my brother. You'll find him everywhere, wherever people live together, tied in despair. Now, Paul took the gospel in Athens that we read about in Acts chapter 17 to the streets, talking to the people who did not know the one true God, Jehovah God. Jesus took his message of God, who he was God, also to the streets, to the hillside, to the beach, to the dock, to the tax office, to the market. God chose to make himself known as a baby named Jesus, as a bivocational carpenter, teacher, and then a rabbi. And now God's Spirit, our counselor, our friend, Our helper is here with us now. God promises that to us today, to work with us, in us, and for us. Jesus left us a legacy, God's Holy Spirit. On senior night, or maybe in your annual you had from high school, sometimes you'll leave something as a senior to somebody in the junior class. Maybe Sandra left a piece of chewing gum under her desk in Miss Williams' English class to Judy in the junior class. Maybe Billy left an old sweaty pair of gym socks in his locker to Paul, who will inherit that locker next year. Jesus, however, leaves us something that we want and we need. Jesus said in his farewell speech, "If you love me, keep my commandments." Jesus gives us commandments, laws, rules on how to live, how to talk, how to act, how to treat people. Jesus left us a life, an example that we can imitate. And then Jesus left us the counselor who would be with us, with them, and with us. The Spirit would be with them, with us, and within us. And this Holy Spirit is part of the legacy that God leaves for us. Jesus left an example for all of us to follow. So how do we live into this legacy of Jesus? We too, like Jesus, are to love, forgive, serve, sacrifice for others. We are to walk beside others as they grow in their relationships to God and each other. And we must consider the legacy we are leaving. What's our footprint? How will people remember us? We, like Jesus and like Paul and the Spirit of God, should be taking the message of God to the streets until we're reunited with Jesus.
Thank you for listening to First Words. For more information about our services or how to get involved in our community, visit us at fumcflorence.org or facebook.com/FlorenceFUMC.